All right, hello everybody. Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, part of the Blue Wire Network. Thank you for locking in today, whether you're watching this on YouTube, which if you are, make sure you like and subscribe, or whether you're listening to this on whatever it is, podcasting platform that you listen to. It is, you know what, man? We're in August already. God, man. It's just, I feel like I blinked my eye and bam, July was over. As always, on this Wednesday show for the summer, I am joined by my good buddy Anthony Marino from Breaking Buffalo Rumblings, part of the Buffalo Rumblings vidcast network. What's going on, dude? How you doing?
Hey man, it's good to see you. And yeah, it is crazy. It's August. I mean, it's like we always we look forward to the start of training camp, but that's kind of that piece too of like you hit that peak of summer and now you're kind of on your way heading towards the start of the regular season, which is great, but summer starts winding down.
I was on, so we taped this again. People, this drops on Wednesday, August 2nd. We're taping this on Tuesday, August 1st. I was on Facebook this morning before we start chatting here. And like, you have your memories like 2 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
A year ago, I wrote about how you blink your eye and it felt like July was over. And it's like, well, I'm going to repeat that now. I feel like about a week or so ago, it was maybe a week where I was trying to figure out if I was going to do anything for the 4th of July, which ultimately I didn't, by the way. But, it's just like, it was like a week ago. I'm like, damn, just a holiday coming up and what am I going to do? And now I'm talking to you and it's freaking August already, man. Jeez.
It's crazy. It is crazy. And you're here and it's like, as your kids get older, when their kids are young, it's you look, oh, hey, you finished the school year. It's kind of this accomplishment. Once they get older, you realize it's like, man, they are just that one step closer to, kind of being these young adults. And it just, it's freaking me out a little bit.
It's funny too, because as a kid, summer really goes by fast because you wait all, for months and months and months to get done with school. You get your summer vacation, and then blink of an eye, you're back. It's fall, and you're back in school again. And I kind of feel like it's the same when you get older. It's just maybe it's because of where we live too. I
Sure.
remember because again, I spent 5 years in Florida, and summer felt forever because it
Yeah.
was so freaking hot and uncomfortably hot in Florida during the summer, and it would rain every day, and it felt like that was going to never end. Just like in Buffalo, it feels, at least to me, maybe I'm wrong and other people feel differently, but it's like you blink your eye here and it gets cold again. But in the winter, it feels like winters in Buffalo last forever. So I guess maybe it's where you live on how you feel about summer. But anyway, there's worse things that can happen, Anthony, than bitching about the summer going by too quick.
You know it.
Let me preface this too, by the way, because we're going to spend a lot of time today talking about Buffalo Bills camp. I've been at 3 practices over the past week, including the last 2. But I need to preface this. I used to do this with Aaron. Got to make sure I do this with you today as well, especially with so much going on. It's one thing when there's nothing going on during the off season, but now training camp's underway. Anthony and I are taping this early on Tuesday, 9 a.m. So the Bills haven't even practiced yet on Tuesday. So if something goes down today, and hopefully if something goes down, it's only positive stuff. But if there's anything significant that happens, any injuries, any stuff like that, we're not talking about it today because we're literally taping this before camp starts. What did I want to talk about before we get into practice? By the way, I know you're a big Joe Marino guy.
Yeah.
I took in practice on Monday, and I got an opportunity to hang out with Joe. I had never met Joe Marino in person. Of course, for people watching and listening, I'm talking about Joe Marino, the host of Locked On Bills podcast. Absolutely love that show. So I was with him, and also from your network, Joe Miller, host of the Overreaction Sports podcast, Hump Day, and he does the John Fina show as well. That was a good time, man. Sitting in the stands, talking to Joe. He's I'll tell you this. He's, I know a lot of podcasters out there, and to some extent, fans know who we are, but Joe's kind of like Marino. I'm talking about. It's kind of like on a different level, man. We were standing all the way up at the balcony, and there was a good 4 or 5 times where people came up to us and like, what's going on, Joe? I'm whoever. I'm a big fan of your show, and took pictures with him. It's kind of like almost like a little bit of mini celebrity. I was a little bit jealous. I was like, hey, I got a show too and all, but
But with Joe, it is interesting with him because he has really become a face of Bill's Mafia,
Yeah,
right?
for
So
sure.
when you think about doing that show 5 days a week, 52 weeks out of the year, coming up with great topics, Joe is he's so smart when he talks about the team and when he talks about the game of football. But also, too, it's just, every once in a while you'll hear something get under his skin and he'll get on a little bit of a rant, but
Mhm.
he's not one of those guys that he's doing it all the time. So, when Joe gets a little excited, it's for a good reason. And when you think about just that space, and if you are someone that is looking to follow the Bills 365 days out of the year, to have Joe as a friend, yes, but just to be able to listen to each and every day, it makes Bills fans that much smarter, that much more well informed. And he should be treated like a celebrity, because when you think of, kind of the space and where things are right now, he is that guy, and he's killing it. I'm so happy for him.
I say this, I've said it before, I'll say it today, I'll say it in the future as well, with tons of respect to so many
Yeah.
really good Bills podcasters out there, man. There's so many good shows, so many different types of shows. I just think Joe's the best. I do. I think
Yeah.
his consistency, his knowledge of the game, his personality, his voice. And again, literally, if he wanted to only listen to one show per day and still be able to be informed with the team, he'd be the guy, because you listen to Lockdown Bills, he literally drops an episode every day. So,
Yeah.
during the season, and whether it's, game previews, game reviews, he has an interactive day every week, a herd mentality, where fans get to put their questions in. I'll tell you another thing too about Joe. This is not to turn into the Joe Marino show here, but anyway, so again, I met him for the first time. Pretty big dude. Now, if you watch him only on YouTube, and he's just from here, chest up, you can't really say that. Well, dude is like 6'1", and he's pretty stacked, dude. He looks like a football player. He looks like an offensive lineman.
Well,
So
I'll tell you this, if you follow Joe on Instagram, and again, it's just like, gosh, we should have him on the show right now. We're talking about him so much. But like Joe has gotten into CrossFit. He's putting up some weight, and
yeah.
he's doing a good job, kind of, as a dad to a young family, he's getting it right, man. And he's killing it in more ways than one.
Yeah, and one thing you say, last thing, it's funny you say we should measure we'll have Joe on the show. Well, guess what, folks? Today we're dropping this on Wednesday. So Thursday night, Joe will be on the show. He'll be with me live from Imperial Pizza. The Live from Imperial series continues on Thursday. Joe, who lives, by the way, a lot of people know this. Joe actually lives in North Carolina, but he's up this week to take in some practices and do some media. He did WGR today. But anyway, he's going to be with me live from Imperial on Thursday. I'm really looking forward to have Joe. Again, I met him for the first time at practice, and be the first time actually sitting down and having a conversation with him on a podcast anyway this week. So
Hey,
look out for that.
let me say real quick though with that,
But
and I enjoy the shows each week. I did love the show with John Fina and Joe Miller. Like, just so
thanks.
candid and so open. And John, if you haven't listened to it yet, go back and give it a listen. I just love the story when he was talking about as a rookie. And at the end, his position coach was asking and said, like, does anyone have any questions? And he's like, here I am, the stupid rookie. I raise my hand and ask a question, and how Kent Hill pulled him aside after practice and told him
Basically,
never to
threaded
do
him.
that again. And I just, knowing John just a little bit, I could see him just being so, asking a question, wanting to do the right thing, and kind of getting scolded by the team captain after.
Yeah, that was funny. Yeah, it was Ken Hull. He basically threatened him up. Tom Bresnan, I think, was the coach too, the
Yeah.
positional coach, where John did that. Thanks. And it was fun to do. And I'll tell you, John is probably, and I've gotten to know, I don't want to say I know all the former Bills, because I don't, but of the ones I do, he might be the most legitimately engaging
Yeah.
former Buffalo Bill that I know. And he knows this. He's talked about this pretty openly too. His time, he was with Buffalo for a decade. It ended ugly, like kind of like a divorce from the franchise. Tom Donahoe kind of more or less ran him out of town, and to this day he still hasn't, forgotten that. But John was a little bit kind of like standoffish with media people and even fans for a time. And it wasn't until recent years where he's really and it's changed a lot. I mean, there's not probably a former Bill that's more involved, on Twitter and events than John Fina. I mean, he loves, and this is not bullshit, Anthony. He legitimately loves sitting
Yeah.
down and chopping it up with fans, man. Whether they're older fans who watched him play, whether they're younger fans who, quite frankly, don't really remember him as a player because they were too young. He just loves talking to everybody. It's funny because when we did the podcast from Imperial last Saturday, probably the hardest part of the show wasn't even like sitting down and talking to John, and Joe Miller, by the way, was with us as well for the show and hanging out too. It wasn't coming up with stuff to talk about because John, it's easy to talk to his ass. Just ask him something and let him wind him up and let him go. The hard part is dragging his ass away from fans because,
Yeah.
like, we were outside and there was, by the way, shout out to a lot of Bills. I mean, there were a lot of Bills fans who came up Saturday. Probably the most I've ever had at Imperial for a show. But anyway, having to drag him away from people to get him on
Yeah.
the set to be able to do the show, that might have been the hardest part. But it was fun, and thank you, and I do appreciate that. If you didn't check it out, because it did drop over the weekend, and I know a lot of people kind of get away from podcasts over the weekend, go back and listen to it. It was interesting. He was very candid too. He talked about a lot of his own training camp
Oh,
experiences
yeah.
and what he thinks, some of the veteran players go through each camp and how they prepare differently if they're a starter as opposed to, a bubble player, stuff like that. All right, so let's get into this current training camp. And again, one more time, need to preface this. This is being taped Tuesday, so shit goes down at practice on Tuesday, and we're not talking about it. You know why? Boy, let me tell you funny, though. Let me put up on the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, I'll read it for the audio people. A tweet. The first day of practice, Tyrell Dodson, the middle linebacking position has been a 3-horse race right now, and it's certainly played out that way. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. But anyway, Tyrell Dodson drew the first day with the ones. And afterwards, Von Miller was talking about how he was surprised that people were even talking about it as a competition. And, look, we've talked about this before. I love me some Von Miller. I know you love Von too, but let's take everything he says with a grain of salt. I put up a tweet, which actually got a pretty funny reaction. So the original tweet that I had during practice was Dodson, Bernard, Spector, first reps at middle linebacker over the first 3 days, respectively, showing there's definitely legitimate competition there. Said, of course, that's news to Vaughn, who said Wednesday he was unaware of any and made it sound like Dodson was pretty much locked in as the guy. Oh, Vaughn. Anyway, so I quote tweeted myself and I said, if Von Miller says you're about to get a promotion at your job, pack your shit up because you're probably getting fired. Just had to throw that out there. There is a competition at middle linebacker. And again, much love to Von Miller, but between the predictions with free agency and when he's going to be back in the lineup and, the stuff with Terrell Dodson, it's like, come on, man. Just don't have some fun with what Vaughn says, but don't take his shit serious. Just don't do it.
The interesting thing is, though, and not to get on a sidetrack already, but like Brandon Beane was on NFL Network yesterday on Monday when it was recorded, and he was talking about the possibility of Von Miller playing in week 1. So that's interesting to me, right? Because it's coming from the general manager,
Sure.
Of course, like just leaving it out there as a possibility and not just Von Miller saying it. So it's yeah, every time he says something though, man, I think of you now because it's just like I know it's something that it's going to come up in our conversation.
And again, I love Vaughn. I'm playfully criticizing him. I'm not. This isn't like significant, legitimate criticism. Just so everyone knows that I'm just messing around. Practice. Okay, so again, 3 times. It was the last 3, or 3 to last 4, I should say. Sunday and Monday. Right there on the field, saw the entire practice from start to finish. I kind of feel, one of the reasons why I wanted to go to a couple practices, Anthony, is if you're going to talk about the team and you're on a show, whether it's yourself or whether you do a podcast with somebody else, I feel like you need to have some eyes there yourself. You know what I mean? You got to just, you get a different perspective. It's kind of like being at a game where you can see plays, whether it's football, hockey, you can see things kind of unwind as they're happening. You just get a different perspective when you're in that stadium or that arena. I kind of feel the same way with practice. The guy over the last 2 days anyway, and I'm talking about Sunday, Monday, not Tuesday. The guy, not counting Stefon Diggs, we'll talk about him in a second, or not counting Josh Allen. Those are the two best players, especially with Vaughn out. Everybody knows that. In my opinion, and I tweeted this, I think the best player on the field over the last 2 days that I've been at practice, the guy who I would say is the MVP of the last couple Bills practices, and I don't even really think it's that close either, is a guy that I know you're pretty high on, a guy that you have talked about potentially what you would at least like to see, maybe him get a contract extension before this season even starts. And I'll tell you, maybe I might have rolled my eyes a little bit when you said that a couple weeks ago, but after watching this the last couple days, I'll tell you right now, if the Bills went up to Gabe Davis today and wanted to get a long-term deal done with him, I'd be completely on board with it. He's healthy, and I was really locked in on him at practice, and he has been sensational these last couple days. I'm telling you, man, he is healthy. He is moving well. He looks physical. He's not just running these 30-yard deep outs or post. It's, all or nothing with him. I'm seeing more and more from watching him at practice. He's running shorter routes. He's getting off the line better. And again, you can only do so much. The first day was without pads. Monday was the first day with pads. But still, you could just see it. The way he's being used in the offense during practice. He's running short slants. He's running intermediate routes, quick stuff to the outside, moving chains. He's not just that deep downfield guy right now at practice. He's doing everything. He's catching everything right now at practice. He looks really, really good, dude. He's dominating Bill's training camp right now.
And
Let's just say that.
That makes me incredibly happy, not just because of stuff that I said before, right? But now for the success of the team.
Mhm.
And I think so often we talked about last year's team, right? And the wide receiver core just lacking in certain pieces,
Yeah.
missing Cole Beasley. Then you're bringing back him and John Brown to try and fill different voids, right? Isaiah McKenzie not being exactly what you wanted to, but Gabe Davis not playing healthy, right? Playing through injury. And Matt Marino has talked about that a lot. I heard him talking earlier today about it. Joe Marino on his podcast talking about how impressed he was with Gabriel Davis. And he was certainly skeptical about should the Bills offer him some sort of a contract extension. Gabe Davis is 24 years old. When you think of what he has accomplished already at 24, and I get it, everyone, wants him to be, I don't know. I don't even know what people want him to be, but for what he is right now, and to hear you say that, to hear Joe talk about it, to hear guys like Matt Marino, it's just like, okay, this is becoming commonplace when we're talking about who he is. And I think a piece that really stood out as well, and I know we're going to talk about Stefon Diggs in a bit, but when he did his 20 plus minute, press conference Q&A session with the media, when he was talking about Gabriel Davis, he said, if I'm not on this team, he's a number one wide receiver. And that's, it's not one of those things where you feel like, are you just pumping up one of your teammates or this and that? But at 24 years old, and for what he's shown he can do already, the arrow's still pointing up. Like, this isn't a guy that has reached the peak or the pinnacle of his career. And to have him having this success so early in camp, that makes me happy.
Sure. And look, let's be careful too, and let's always put things in perspective. Lots of times, lots of years, there's camp. Now, unlike, a lot of these guys who flash at camp and then you never hear from them again, they go away. Gabe Davis is a very accomplished NFL player. So there's a big difference between him and a guy like, Brandon Riley or somebody who looks really good in camp one year and is trying to make a roster. But so keeping it in perspective, he still looks good. And another thing I noticed too, and again, these are things that you see when you're actually at camp watching practice instead of just, relying on what, other people are saying or a handful of videos. You always would expect, like when they're off to the side, which by the way, Josh and Stefon Diggs communicate a lot with each other. Like they're off talking to each other a lot. But what I wanted to add to that is I've noticed that it's not just Josh and Stefon. It's Josh, Stefon, and Gabe Davis. Like I've seen them multiple times over the last couple of days where the three of them might be off while other guys are running drills or whatever have you. These three guys are communicating with each other. And like I said, it's one thing for him to see him catch a couple balls downfield because we've seen plenty of that. Monday, he roasted Gabe Davis roasted Dane Jackson. Got past him, beat him. It was an exciting play. Would have probably been about a 40-yard touchdown or so. On Sunday's practice, at the end, they did a 2-minute drill, and Gabe Davis caught a touchdown on the final play. Although, to be fair to the defense, they were going nuts, and kind of said afterwards, if there was instant replay, that Davis might not have had both feet in. But anyway, got credit for scoring the touchdown at the end of the 2-minute drill. But like I said, Anthony, the big thing is it seems like he's being used in different ways. Like he's not just going down the field. Like they were throwing to him in 11-on-11s a lot.
Yeah.
Short passes, these 7-8 yard passes that move the chains. So it seems like he's kind of they're expanding his role a little bit. I kind of felt like he was a little bit, you look at that Pittsburgh game where he catches 2 bombs and he puts up huge numbers. Then other games he might disappear. I remember his rookie year in the playoffs when the Bills beat the Colts.
Oh, absolutely.
And he had a couple great sideline catches on that drive before the half to move the chains.
Absolutely.
Based on what I'm seeing at practice, I'm kind of feeling like that's the Gabe Davis that we're seeing. And he talked too, by the way. He talked about his injury slowing it down and also affected his confidence some. And I don't know, Ed. I think I'm just looking at a guy right now who is not just looking the part physically, but I think mentally he's really confident right now. And in a contract year, so plenty of motivation.
Well, and there's some pieces too. You talked about that Pittsburgh game. He was great in the opener against the Rams. Yep. Obviously, going back to the game against the Chiefs. I mean, and then the injury sets in and you're kind of dealing with that. And it's something that's nagging. And it's to the point, right? This isn't a camp darling. This is someone that we have seen dominate football games before. And not just hey, I dominated one game. Like, not to pick on Isaiah McKenzie, right? Where it's like, hey, you see him in week 17 against the Dolphins or, one game against the Patriots where, a couple guys were out because of COVID. Like Davis has been able to do this and to accomplish this. So it's like, I realize it's sort of like the hype building back up around him, but fine. And I know there will be people out there. I don't know why he's a polarizing figure amongst some Bills fans. And some will say, oh, the drops. Like, listen, man, when you've got a guy that can catch bombs like he can, yeah, there's going to be some drops in there. Like, of course, there's going to be, ones that shouldn't be there or, oh, he's clapping at the ball. Like, whatever, man. There is no perfect wide receiver out there. And as a number 2 wide receiver, he's about as good as you can get. So it's like, I'm embracing him, and I hope that contract extension comes soon.
I feel confident that if we're going to make bold predictions right now, we'll do that at some point. We're not yet, but I feel comfortable saying that I really truly expect a big season from him, and I expected that. I said that last year, which by the way, inconsistent and rocky, but it's not like he sucked last year. He had 800 yards and 6 touchdowns, 8 touchdowns, something. I think maybe 8 touchdowns. He had a decent year, and if you compare him to wide receiver 2s around the league, you would know that. I just think the expectations were a little ridiculous last year based on what he did against Kansas City. But anyway, look, he is going to drop some balls. I'll tell you where he's not dropping any balls. It was training camp. 2 days, I didn't see a ball touch the ground that was near his hands. So
take it.
He's looking really, really good right now. Like I said, in my opinion, I feel like he's dominating camp. If you take away Diggs and Josh, he very well could be the MVP early on of training camp for whatever that's worth. Before we take a break, I do want to talk about Stefon Diggs because, well, 2 things. Number one, we talked about it before camp started, which was a week ago, actually. And you had him on your list at the top of Bills to prove, which, by the way, again, if you didn't catch last week's show, he's not talking talent or anything on the field. It was about being, the player that he's been. And also, let's just put in this shit behind us, all the stuff from the offseason. And I talked about that as well, that I really hoped on day 1 of camp, he would just get in front of a microphone, say his piece, and then we could all move on and not have to have that be a lingering story anymore because it was really goddamn annoying. Well, he did that. And not only did he do that, dude, he held court for 20 minutes and he was extremely transparent. I felt like he was honest. I thought he was being spoke with some passion. And I was really, really, really pleased that he did that, because he could have just showed up at camp and he could have just went out and started playing, and we still probably would have had some lingering questions that we felt like he needed to answer. But he held court and he did it well. And now that's a non-story at this point. Your thoughts on that before we talk about him as a player?
Yeah, so it's everything you said is spot on. And I was talking on my show earlier this week about your comments. I think you had it in a tweet where you'd said like, Diggs was perfect. I'm paraphrasing here, right? But
Mm,
I just wish he had done it, a month ago or 2 months ago, whatever
sure.
you said. But sometimes with this, and whatever the issue is or was or anything like that, sometimes it's like someone's got to be ready to have the conversation. And you see it in sports all the time where like here comes the coach, the athlete, the whoever with a written statement that they're reading to share something like this. And that wasn't it with Diggs. I mean, even to the beginning, right? And I'm not quite sure who it was that was asking him the question, was maybe beating around the bush a little bit, and Diggs was like, asking him like, what is it that you're asking? Like he was ready to share. It wasn't like a hey, let me come out with a prepared statement. And for him to go through and just to talk and answer the questions and to be very upfront and to be very honest, like that's what you want from professional athletes, right? We can say all the time, "Oh, I want to hear from them," and then they'll read a statement or just something very canned, cliched type of answer, and it becomes, well, then you're criticizing them for that. Yes, it took a little bit longer. Credit to the Bills PR staff for having him speak on day one, for Diggs for doing a great job with it, because you didn't want it to linger any longer than it already had. And from this standpoint, it's just like it does feel like water under the bridge. Every report from camp, um, everything seems good. Everyone seems happy, so it's good.
You know what? I was wrong. I was wrong when I criticized him. This was the time to speak. Maybe at the
Sure.
time, and again, we don't know we think we know everything, and we don't. Nobody does. We don't know what's going on behind closed doors, and we still don't know what exactly happened behind closed doors. Maybe at the time he wasn't ready to speak. Maybe at
Yeah.
the time he was still putting thoughts together. Maybe at the time he was still working out issues that he might have had, whether it was with Sean McDermott or with Ken Dorsey or with Josh Allen or whatever it is. And by the way, I mean, his press conference was about winning. You could tell how serious he is about winning, how passionate he is. And that's what he cares about. He wants to win, and he's frustrated because he feels like this team has, over the last couple of years, thrown away really good opportunities to reach the Super Bowl. And he's not wrong either.
And Pat, think about a time when you've been frustrated in life before and you've had a conversation, whether it be with a spouse, a coworker, a friend, anybody,
Sure.
and then you come away and you're just like, shoot, man, like, and it's not even that you being frustrated is wrong, but it just wasn't the right time to have a conversation. And
Absolutely.
when you talk about Diggs, like, yeah, I've given him the benefit of the doubt with all of this. So some might be like, Anthony, come on. But it's true though, when you're not ready, it's like take a step away, have the conversation when you're ready. He clearly was. And like you said, I mean, you can say you were wrong, but you weren't. Like it's not, nobody was wrong for being like wishing that he had spoken earlier and cleared the air, because you were sick of hearing about it and talking about it. And even, again, for me to put him on the top of that list last week, it's like, of course, it has nothing to do with any of his talent or
Right.
whatever, but it was just to be able to move on from that piece. But he wasn't ready beforehand, and he was ready last week and took care of business.
Let me say this. It is There's nothing wrong with wanting him to speak earlier. Like I wish he would have spoken,
Yeah.
a couple weeks, couple months earlier. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not wrong. What's wrong? Maybe I did it a little bit, some more than others, but Stefon Diggs was dragged through the mud a lot over this off season for his Instagram, whatever he would say on Instagram or whatever on Twitter or his lack of not showing up, or especially not speaking. Being a leader, being a captain, and not speaking up got criticized. I still, to some extent, feel to an extent, a little bit of it was warranted. And again, I wish he would have, but he do got dragged through the mud. And this guy is a baller, and he's one of the best players. He's one of the best players, one of the best receivers in the entire league, not just obviously the best receiver on this team. Potentially, arguably, he's the best receiver this team's ever had. That's how good he is, man. That's how good he is. It's look, watching him at practice in person, the vibe you get from, there's something different about him. There's lots of good pass catchers on this team. There's lots of talented players on this team. And by the way, apologies to Dane Jackson. I'm thinking about it now. Gabe Davis getting behind somebody for a long touchdown wasn't on Dane Jackson. It was actually on Trey White. And Trey White's looked good in camp. We'll talk about him in a minute. I say that because Stefon Diggs just cooked Dane Jackson on a long pass at practice on Monday. So that's why I had the wrong guy for Dane. But anyway, back to Stefon. There's just an aura about him. There's something about, he just looks like he's on a different level. And again, I said it with Gabe. I don't think a ball's touched the ground at any drill or anything at practice 3 times watching with Stefon. He's in midseason form at the end of July in training camp, route running, hands. Let me tell you about one play, but then we're going to take a break. I got to tell you about this play. So Sunday's practice, all right, I got there late. I went with my buddy Mike. And if you've been to Bills practice, you know, if you want to get in those bleachers and get a good seat and get up high, then you got to pretty much get there early, especially on the weekends where a lot of people are off from work and there's a lot more kids who come to practice. You know, people bring their families and stuff like that. So anyway, Sunday, got to practice late. No bleacher seats were available anywhere. Had to stand along a fence with the kids, not in the position that I wanted to be in. But the one good thing about the way it worked out is directly in front of us were the wide receivers doing their drills and doing working. And then they started doing one-on-ones, and they were kind of right in front of us. So maybe 20 yards from me, Stefon Diggs. And every time on Sunday, he went one-on-one. It was with Trey White all 3 times. And Trey looked good. But I'm telling you, Stefon just got him 3 times in a row. But anyway, this one, we'll call it a front shoulder pass. It was a laser. You have to have seen it to appreciate it. He put one quick move, got to the sideline. Trey White's coverage was right there. And Josh Allen threw a football, and it literally whizzed by Trey White's earpiece. Like he easily could have got hit in the helmet. Missed him by this much. Stefon's running, and it's like it's almost like he doesn't look like he's seeing the ball. And then in an instant, his hands go up at literally the last second with the ball like this. Comes down 2 feet inbounds, completes the catch. The crowd lost their mind. It was unbelievable. The chemistry between, so if you're worried about chemistry between Josh and Stefon, don't. But anyway, holy shit, was this a catch, man, from Stefon. He's just unbelievable. He's fun to watch. He's so intense, too. Holy shit, man.
Well, and you think of from the time he came in 2020 and just kind of raising the bar for what this team has been. That's not just a coincidence, right? That the leap that Josh Allen has made, the leap that he has made, those two, the symbiotic relationship that they have with one another, and for you to be able to see that up close and personal, that's pretty awesome.
It was awesome. And, you know, to finish up with Stefon, too, and just the intensity that he has on Monday's practice, the Bills were doing kind of short drives, and he beat Teron Johnson. We'll talk about him in a few minutes as well. He caught the ball for a touchdown, threw it up. It was like NFL regular season mode, man. Yeah. He's flexing and yelling. You could almost hear him from the stands. Me and Marino looked at each other like, God damn, because he was fired up. So anyway, let's take a quick break. And I got some other notes from Bill's practice over the last couple of days. Not just a Gabe Davis and Stefon Diggs podcast today, although it easily could be. So be right back. All right, I'm back here with Anthony Marino from Buffalo Rumblings. We've given out some flowers, so to speak, to Gabe and to Stefon. And you know what? Throw another flower out there, too, because I've kept a close eye on Dalton Kincaid through practice. And I'm going to tell you, dude, I keep saying it. It sounds like a broken record how balls aren't touching the ground. Well, they're really not touching the ground with Dalton Kincaid. This guy catches freaking everything. And his route running, Anthony, is it's almost hard to explain. It doesn't even look like he's running hard. It doesn't even look like he's cutting hard. It's the only two words I could describe from what I've seen with Dalton Kincaid, and we'll see how he blocks. Because ultimately, if he's going to be out there on the field a lot, and they're not going to throw every single time he's out there, he's going to have to become at least an adequate NFL tight end blocker. But when it comes to routes, hands, the two words that I keep coming up with are smooth and effortless. It just looks like he's gliding out there, and he's impressive. I mean, he beat Matt Milano on a play, and then they were doing these drills. I almost felt sorry for Dean Marlowe because that was another one that got a big reaction from the crowd. Obviously, fans are locked into Kincaid.
Yeah.
I would say Josh Allen, obviously, and then Stefon right behind him in terms of crowd reaction and popularity, and DeMar too, for obvious reasons. But Dalton Kincaid's right up there too. Like the crowd's following him every time his hands touch a football. Year cheers. Anyway, he shook D Marlowe out of his jockstrap on one play or route, I should say, during drills. Anyway, my point is this: he's looking the part. He is looking the part. I would be stunned if he's not involved in this offense from week one.
Well, and you think again, a first round draft pick, and I know sometimes when you talk to some guys in the past, it's not a sure thing for what they are going to be when they come into camp. And to your point, getting the pads on, doing some blocking, that is going to be that next step, right, for him. But early on, to see the reaction from everyone, media members alike, and you just look at and you talk about the rapport he has with Josh Allen. It sounds like he's doing all the right things in the tight end room, right? You reading different stories about him, bringing snacks each day and kind of just embracing the role of being a rookie. Dawson Knox speaking glowingly about him. It's hard because right now the hype train for him, it's high. But when you talk about it and it's like the impact that he can make, it's like, the guy can catch 4 passes a game and finish the year with 65 to 70 receptions. Like, to get that type of production. And when you talk about him playing in the slot, and if you're going 12 personnel, to be an adequate blocker, it's like, well, listen, I don't think Cole Beasley was like lighting the world on fire at 5'7", 175
Right.
pounds. Not to just say that by sheer size alone that Kincaid will be a better blocker, but if they can coach him up there as well, it's going to give this offense a lot of flexibility when you look at his potential and what he can be. It's exciting, man. It's hard not to get too excited about him based on all the reports so far, but early on, things are looking pretty good.
When you bring up potential numbers for him, I'll point out that it would take almost like a historic rookie season for an NFL tight end to put up those type of numbers. But that said, he's kind of his tight end is like his position, but or his official position. Dude plays a lot on the slot, though, man. He's almost like a receiver. So I want to throw that out there for people who are like, "Oh, no tight ends ever caught 60 passes or whatever their rookie year." Well, again, he's not going to be an inline tight end an awful lot. Which another thing I noticed being at practice for a couple days, it seems like the first time the Bills would run when they would run 11 on 11s with the ones, and they get out real quick, the ones, the twos, the threes. But anyway, the first time it would be like their 3 receiver set. And then the second time they would do a lot of 12 personnel. And what I noticed, especially last Sunday at practices, when Knox and Kincaid are out there, they're not just both out there, they're lining them up in a lot of ways. Like Kincaid in some alignments was playing H-back, and others he's out there in the slot. There were a couple where he was in line and Knox was spread out. Both were spread out. So it seems like Ken Dorsey's working on doing a lot of different formations, a lot of motion going on too when they're both out there. So that's pretty, that's fun to see the creativity, what they're coming up with so far early on at camp anyway, with these practices. I would say this too. The offense Monday looked good. the first couple days, which is common. I think the defense was getting for sure the better of the offense. But I thought on Monday, especially the offense, it was a good overall day for them. Switching to the defensive side, I know Kyrie Elam's a guy that we talk about a lot that people want to know a lot about. So Sunday, and I think I talked about this on my show the other day. Look, he's first of all, people better get used to this, and I know that a lot of people are not going to like this. Dane Jackson he has not been named the starter. I'd be willing to bet at this point Dane Jackson week 1 is opposite Trey White. So I'm going to put that out there before anything else. And I think it's starting to become obvious. Like he's out there all the time the last couple of days with the ones. It's not like they're, middle linebacker. They're taking turns each day who's running with the ones. It ain't like that at corner. It's been Dane Jackson now for a couple days in a row. Anyway, Sunday, Kyrie Elam, annoying. It's annoying to watch because he has a couple of really good reps and then he has a couple awful reps, man.
Yeah.
I could see, let me just say this, based on what I saw Sunday, I could see why the coaches aren't as high on him as we want them to be, or as we might be as podcasters, content creators, fans, whatever. Monday though, he had a really good practice. He was going one-on-one with Diggs, and there was one rep, and I love his competitiveness. That's what I'm getting to, by the way, with Kyrie Elam. So they're doing one-on-one drills, and he was lined up against Diggs one time, and he had a good rep, and Diggs was blaming him for holding. It wasn't holding. It was a good rep for Elam. Anyway, next time Diggs is lined up, I forgot the corner's first name, so I apologize, but I know it's Austin, number 29. He's out there. Kyrie basically grabs him and pushes him off to the side. And he wants that rep with Diggs. Now, to be fair, Diggs ended up beating him. He broke off a route. It was a short completion, but they're in each other's face. Anyway, my point was, and Elam on Monday was getting reps ahead of Christian Benford, which is a flip-flop of what it had been. It was a promising practice for him on Monday, kind of a very up and down camp. I could see why, and I know fans don't like hearing this, but I could see why Dane Jackson, who's not the greatest, but maybe a little more steady and trustworthy from McDermott, is out there. Elam's very shaky right now is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and I still wrestle with this, and I talk about it probably more than I should, but it's just like, with Dane Jackson, what you have, and consistency is fine, but like if consistency is decent, I don't want to use the term average. It's above average, but that's just what you're always going to get. It's like you've got to teach through the upside. And I get it as a coach, if there's inconsistency, that can drive you crazy, right? I honestly, when you talk about things, I am also expecting Dane Jackson to be the starter, but I'm expecting there to be a rotation at cornerback.
Could be.
Where it's going to be Dane Jackson like getting 65% of the snaps, and then Kyrie Elam getting 40 or 35% of the snaps, maybe based on the matchup or the opponent. We're looking to lock in someone as that cornerback too. We have seen this team have a rotation or a timeshare as long as Sean McDermott has been here, whether it's been Josh Norman or if it's been EJ Gaines or Kevin Johnson. They were always kind of going back and forth. And then what you had one season where Levi Wallace was really the full-time starter, and then he leaves in free agency. So that's, I guess, if you're making a bold prediction, that's another one that I would throw out there.
I can understand why fans wouldn't like Dane Jackson starting, because I think with Dane Jackson, I think you've seen his ceiling. He's okay. He gives up plays.
And I have nothing against Dane Jackson. Sure. Great teammate, plays hard. For a 7th round draft pick, everything that he has done, kudos to him. Like, none of this is a reflection on him in any way, shape, or form when I get frustrated around the Kyrie Elam situation.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, you know what you're getting with him. He keeps guys in front of him. He doesn't give up a lot of big plays, gives up a lot of catches. And again, I get it. Whereas with Elam and Bedford too, you would say, well, their ceiling's higher because you haven't really seen their potential to this point where you got to know where Dane is. But anyway, I don't know. It's just my gut. I'm pretty confident that Dane Jackson is starting. Middle linebacker, I don't really got nothing to add. Everyone's talked about it. Dodson, Bernard, Spector, they're going one day at a time. Again, as we're taping this on Tuesday, I was trying to get a look here. going into practice as we're taping as it starts, but it's a little bit too early. If they're going by the rotation they have been, that would mean Spector would be getting work with the ones on Tuesday. The only thing I will say about linebacker, I don't look, I'm not an expert. I don't know measurables that well, but I will say compared to other middle linebackers around the league, Terrell Bernard just really small. I know what he looks small. Some players are maybe they're bigger than it seems. He don't even seem like he's big, man. Like he looks like he should be playing free safety. I know he's not a safety, but I'm just gonna say I'm not a Terrell Bernard guy. I'd like to be wrong, but if I don't think he's going to start. By the way, I think Dotson's going to. So Von Miller ultimately is probably going to be right at the end of the day.
It's tough, right? And again, I'm not one of those guys either that it's like, oh, there's got to be this measurables, his arm length has to be this or any of those types of things. But I do agree with you. When you look at him, it's just, I mean, even Dorian Williams, who they don't have as part of this competition. Okay, you see him out there and it's like, yeah, I could see this guy, right, passing the look test. And it's not about the look test, but that's the one piece that's still probably the biggest question mark, because we can talk about cornerback too every show from now through the entire season. But we've seen Dane Jackson perform and Christian Benford and Kyer Elam that there's a level of starting cornerback that is there. At middle linebacker, you haven't seen it yet, and you just hope it doesn't bite you in the ass this year.
Look, man, the defense, they can still be fine. Sean McDermott can come up with a lot of things, a lot of ways to kind of mask what they got going on in middle linebacker. But the one thing for certain, say what you want about Tremaine Edmonds, is a big downgrade. Whoever emerges as a starter this year is 100% going to be a downgrade. Maybe the defensive line playing better, the secondary being healthy, that will ultimately help the linebacker position. But in terms of the personnel, the player, whoever it is, they're not even going to be close to the same level as Tremaine. That's just the way it goes in the NFL. You can't upgrade at every single position and not have any losses. We all know that. I'm emptying out my notebook here real quick with the rest of the Bill stuff I have. Ed Oliver, dominant. I got those in my notes from Monday. I think Ed Oliver's had a really good training camp from what I saw. Teron Johnson, want to throw this out there. Stud. We all know that. Great on Sunday, but I got to say, Monday, just one of those days, rough practice, man. I was standing right, me and Joe Marino talking about it during practice. He said he was chasing rabbits. And what he meant by that was guys were catching a lot of footballs and he was chasing them down in front of them. And also on that trick play, hit Josh Allen really hard, which was really, really stupid. I know he's a competitor. I know he's trying to break up a play, but come on, your boy's got a red jersey on. Pull up, let him catch the ball. Let the crowd cheer. It was a double reverse, and it was Dawson Knox who should not have thrown the football, by the way, because Josh was not open. Anyway, do the football, try to get the crowd going a little bit. Jerron knocked him down. Josh was slow to get up. Yeah, I'm sure you all know this story right now. Yeah, that was not cool. So that was on Teron. Stefon beat him for a touchdown on Monday that we talked about. Not a great day for Teron, but of all the Bills, that's probably one of the guys that you got to worry about the least if he has an off day at training camp. But I did want to mention that. Defensive ends. Okay, did you have something?
No, I did not. I just was going to say, like, that's a guy we've seen enough great play from that. No
worries. Yeah, no worries. But it was weird to watch him struggle a little bit, even if it was just for one day. I think the defensive end position, nobody talks about this. I think there might be not just one, but even potentially two surprise cuts. I'm going to say that. First of all, AJ Epinesa, I almost feel like it's becoming a tradition where he looks really good in training camp. And this is going to be the year where he looks really good. It's happening again. He's looked really good in training camp. Monday when the pads came on, he looked really good. He had some wins in the pass rush. I think he's clearly ahead of Boogie Basham right now in a rotation. Like when Vaughn comes back, it's going to be Vaughn and Rizzo, and then it's going to be Leonard Floyd, and I feel like it's going to be AJ Epinesa. I feel like those are your top four. So one of the things I'm getting at is I think Boogie Basham's in trouble. I think whether maybe they try to trade and get something for him. I mean, he is a second round pick, only going in the year 3, so maybe he's got some trade value. But worst case, whether it's trade, whether it's release, I think there's at least a fair chance that Boogie Basham's not on the roster. I think Shane Ray, by the way, I don't know if he's going to stick around or not, but I've been pretty impressed with him. He certainly has made some splash plays. So anyway, Boogie's one, and there's another name I'm going to throw at you. Shaq Lawson.
Yeah.
Shaq is a good run defender, doesn't bring a lot in the pass rush. He has been quiet in camp, and I've seen him 3 times. He's been really quiet, hasn't really done anything, and he's not getting a lot of reps either. I mean, maybe because he's a veteran, they kind of know what he could do, but they also know what result some of these other guys can do, and they're out there a lot more. It's a very quiet camp for Shaq. So if whether they keep, what's it, Kingsley Jonathan, he's looked good.
Yeah.
He can play special teams too. I wouldn't be stunned if both Boogie and Shaq are not on this roster week 1. Certainly one of them. I do not expect both of them to be there. And there's a decent chance you might see them both gone.
Yeah, Shaq's an interesting one, right? And you talk about
and I like him.
And I've always liked Shaq. I mean, heck, I didn't even want to see him leave when his rookie contract wrapped up and he went and signed with the Dolphins. But it just it might be time. And you've seen too, like, when he hits free agency, there haven't been a ton of teams out there calling on Shaq Lawson. I mean, this could be a guy, he ends up maybe being a cut. Maybe he just ends up on your practice squad of somebody like, hey, break glass in case of emergency. I don't even know if that's something he would want to consider, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of other options out there because as free agency has come about, here he is back in Buffalo on a 1-year kind of like a vet minimum type of deal. I think someone had said this morning, his only guaranteed contract, part of his contract for this season is like $425,000.
Right.
I think that was from Joe Biscaglia. So just, yeah, he might be on the outside looking in, especially even if it is between him and Basham or, one of these other guys, at least Boogie Basham, you could say there's still some upside there, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Real quick note, as we tape this on Tuesday, I was just looking at a tweet from Thad Brown. They do walkthrough. So they do a first team walkthrough to start practice, offense versus defense, but it's just walking through. They're not, it's not a competitive segment of practice. Anyway, worth noting, Osiris Torrance was getting the walkthrough ones with the first team, I should say. Although I think he was on Monday, and then Bates started when they were live, although Torrance played a lot. So by the way, as an aside, that is a legitimate competition.
Yeah.
That is legit. That is going to probably come down to, over the next couple of weeks. But also what was noteworthy is even though it's a walkthrough, we just talked about this earlier in the show. If they were to keep to their rotation or 3-horse race and middle linebacker, that would have put Spector in with the ones. But Dad just tweeted that it was Terrell Dodson that was actually in with the ones today. So I don't know. We'll end up seeing what that means. One last Bills thing too. I want to give some credit to the PR department, the media relations department. They've done an excellent job of getting the right people available to talk. Like first day of camp, everyone wanted to hear from Stefon Diggs, and everybody knew that. And they made him available. Monday's practice, Damar Hamlin, first day of padded practice, first day of physicality since what happened in Cincinnati last year. And they made him available, which, by the way, he is a very articulate, well thought out spokesperson. God, I hate to say it this way because I don't ever want to see something happen to somebody like what happened to him. But if there's somebody who can handle it and kind of get that word out to people and speak in a way that people are going to listen, Damar Hamlin is that guy. He is fantastic. And I honestly never really paid attention. So, I mean, maybe he's always, been articulate and spoke creatively and as well as he does. I don't know because I never really paid, frankly, much attention when he was a backup safety. But in light of what happened, he had some riveting thoughts on during the press conference on Monday. So I just wanted to give him credit and give the Bills credit for throwing the right people out. I had another segment that I was going to get into about like some potential tough cuts besides just the defensive ends we talked about. But you know what? We'll save that for next week because there's a handful of guys that I think some people aren't talking about that could be in trouble. But we'll save that. Go ahead.
Let me ask you, not about a tough cut. I think you had said something before about Ed Oliver, and we haven't heard a lot about Oliver. But lately, it seems that things have picked up that he's been kind of dominant in camp. And have you seen that? Did you see that in the 3 days you were there? I know sometimes with defensive tackles and interior offensive linemen, it's hard to gauge. But I think him getting the contract this offseason and another one of those guys that becomes a little bit of a hot button topic. What you saw there.
He would have had a sack on Monday. He was busting up runs during like offensive line versus defensive line drills. He looks good. He looks fresh. I've seen it before though. When he's healthy, his motor is going, he's a force. The problem, the book on Ed Oliver is he's a little bit too much of a flash player.
Yeah.
He goes or streaky player. Like he will look dominant during the regular season, and then he kind of disappears a little bit. Some of that I'm sure is health. Maybe some of that was a contract. I don't know. He's got that security now. I can only speak on base what I saw at camp, and what I've seen at camp is a really good looking defensive tackle right now, which made me think of another quick thought. You know who else has had a good camp from what I've seen, which is nice to see? Tim Settle. Because I thought Tim Settle didn't play well at all last year. I was very high on him last year. I think we talked about this before. And I didn't think he looked good, but he's definitely caught my eye during training camp. He's looked good.
He was on your list last week, and there's been
that's right, he was. Yeah,
that he's looked good. So to see that taking place is that could be huge.
Yeah, for sure. He's looked good. All right, let's get to our finish the sentence segment. We do this at the end of each episode. 4 questions, not really sports questions. In fact, no sports questions this week. Just an opportunity to get to know a little bit more about Mr. Marino as well as myself. Something different for the fans here at the end. All right, let's get right into it here. First one. The first magazine I ever loved was blank.
Sports Illustrated. And I know that's probably the answer for so many folks in our generation, right? But
sure.
For you youngsters out there, before the days of the internet, you would wait for Sports Illustrated to show up, each week, or whether you're at school to get to the copy in the library to be able to read feature stories on what was happening in sports, right? Because you didn't get it from your hometown newspaper all the time, because they were covering more local and regional type of stories. But for me, it was really to get like that NBA type of coverage that as the game was emerging, Sports Illustrated was the one place that I could really get it. So for me, that was the first magazine I ever loved.
We could probably do an entire podcast just on how significant Sports Illustrated was when you and I were kids. It's different now with the internet and all that stuff. But yeah, back in those days, I don't know how Sports Illustrated couldn't be the answer for sports fans. Although I will say, as a kid who grew up obsessed with wrestling, Pro Wrestling Illustrated might be my answer as well. I was like, I had to get that every single month for the rankings, going by territories, like the top 10, the most liked, the most hated at the time. That was like my go-to. I had to have it.
Oh my God, Pat, you just brought back so many memories. So there would be like 2 pieces when I would get Pro Wrestling Illustrated. Like one, what was the pull-out poster that you would get each month?
Oh yeah.
You could have and hang up in your room. But those top 10 rankings, right, where it would be, here's the top 10 individuals and tag team rankings for WWF, NWA, AWA.
Yep.
And that would be the first thing I would look to each and every month. And man, how much I loved that. Oh my God. I would change my answer right now to be quite honest, because and I didn't subscribe to it. It would be like walking around Wegmans.
Me too.
And waiting and looking through that magazine section, right? Because like, mom's walking around shopping. I can go kill a half an hour at the magazine department in Pro Wrestling Illustrated. That was a go-to.
Me too. I didn't subscribe. I think I've said this before. I would take a ride from the west side on my bike all the way to North Buffalo, Delaware and Hurdle, to that little brown newsstand on the corner there, and I would get Pro Wrestling Illustrated. I get a couple other wrestling magazines too. But that was always the first one that I read every month. Funny, I might have changed your mind. You might have changed my mind, because I easily could have said Sports Illustrated as well. All right, next one. The worst movie I've ever seen is blank.
Gosh, I've seen a lot of bad movies, but there's also, sometimes you watch something, it's going to be a cheesy action movie or a bad rom-com or something like that, I will say the Fantastic Four. And that is, it's
That's a
kind of
good
in
one.
the heart of when the Marvel movies, and not the first ones that came out with Jessica Alba and Chris Evans, but the one with Miles Teller and with Michael B. Jordan. There was such an anticipation, right? Where you had the guy that directed that movie, Chronicle, right? There was like, oh man, this is going to be a new iteration of the Final Four, kind of that golden age of where, and I know it wasn't part of the Marvel universe, but you see this coming. And with the casting, you can look at Miles Teller now for what he was with Top Gun Maverick and Whiplash and other pieces where it's just like, okay, this guy is a star. Michael B. Jordan, I mean, quite possibly like one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, right? Just for what he's done in the Creed movies and other pieces, just such a well-versed actor. And you see this and it's like, man, this is some inspired casting to have him as Johnny Storm, like breaking the mold a little bit. And what a just complete, utter disaster that went nowhere, never had any sort of stakes, anything. And you're just watching it and it's like, what even just happened here? So, it's a little bit, and the reviews right away were horrible. So you knew it wasn't going to be great, but it's a little bit of for what that could have and should have been. Oh, yeah, that one for me.
Look, there's a lot of ones I'm sure I could go with. I just went with the first one that popped in my mind when this question came up to me. I was a teenager and I actually saw this at the movies, Showplace Theater. Friday the 13th, it was Jason Takes Manhattan. I remember seeing it at the movies. And, the early ones were really scary, really good. It just jumped the shark at this point. I remember, and again, I don't remember a lot of details from the movie. I wasn't going to bother to look it up. But I do remember at some point on a boat, some dude tried to fist fight Jason. Like after all the shit he's done through the earlier movies, you can't kill this guy. Some guy was talking shit and boxing. It was a boxer and he was on the boat or whatever. And of course, Jason killed his ass. But I remember that scene. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me right now? This guy's going to box Jason Meyer or Jason Voorhees. Get out of here, man. It was just brutal. So there's a million ones I could pick. But for that scene alone and seeing it at the movies and remember it as a teenager, I'm definitely going Friday the 13th, Jason Takes Manhattan. All right, two more here, then we'll get out. If you could expertly, and I said expertly, play one musical instrument, it would be blank.
Piano. And, listen, I would not look to be, some concert pianist or anything like that. It's, I think to my Instagram feed, and I'm always so impressed by these guys that, they'll do these different mashups or medleys of like current hip hop and R&B and wove it in just such a classical type of way. And when you just see that, it's like, yeah, that would be the pick for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. I got nothing to add to. I would say piano as well. It'd be nice to be able to just play anything at any time. All right, last one here. Someone in the media that inspired me when I was younger was blank. Like
Mike Catalana.
Mike Catalana, okay.
Mike Catalana. So growing up in Rochester, Mike was the man, right? When you would think of, when you would literally watch the news every day and just waiting for the sports segment to come up, Mike just always had a great way about him, a very genuine way. And in addition to that, when I was in high school, our high school basketball team was state champions, nationally ranked, all this type of stuff. John Wallace, who played at Syracuse, was on our team. So it was, a segment almost like daily. And Mike covered the team and he was just, you'd see him around and like just growing up with him, he was that guy. And honestly, to see what he's doing now with Buffalo Plus and with the podcast and the YouTube piece,
they crush it.
And with Dan and Jenna, and they're fantastic. But Mike, to just sort of evolve over all these years, I always like looked up to him as a kid, and to see him sort of doing it, to see him doing it now. That's someone I always really admired, and I still do today.
Yeah, Mike's a good answer. I want to say Larry Felser because he did inspire me a lot when I was a kid. Reading him and kind of made me want to be. I used to want to be a sports writer when I was a kid, so he had a big influence. I'm going to throw out a name, though, and not a lot of people in Buffalo will know this name unless you're a big time golfer. If you're into golf in Western New York, you would know the name Rick Zurak because Rick Zurak Golf, very popular. But not what a lot of people don't know is that he was a sportscaster for Channel. He was in Florida and he came to Buffalo and he was a Channel 7 sportscaster for a while. I say him because of my cousin. And
that's awesome.
He was like my idol when I was a little kid because I wanted to be a sports guy who had the camera and the microphone in front of him, and very popular, good looking dude. So when I was a kid, he inspired me. I wanted to get into sports media a lot because I had my much older cousin who was doing it for Channel 7. So that's the name that I would come up with. Like I said, if you're a golf guy in Western New York, you know the name Rick Zurak Golf, but otherwise you might not even know who that is. So anyway, all right. We are going to get out of here. Thank you as always, Anthony Marino. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Anth Marino. The last 10 minutes of our pod while we're talking, I'm kind of trying to follow along with notes, just potentially to see if anything was going on with the Bills. The one thing I will say is that I saw Jordan Poyer's not practicing today. He's in street clothes. Tim Settle, we just talked him up a few minutes ago. He's not practicing, but he's on a stationary bike. Hopefully it's nothing serious. I don't think it is. Doesn't sound like it is. With either of those guys. But anyway, make sure you follow Anthony on Twitter. Check out Breaking Buffalo Rumblings and all the stuff on the Buffalo Rumblings Podcast Network. Thanks as always, buddy. This was fun.
You got it, man. See you next week.
All right, guys. And I will be back live from Imperial Pizza tomorrow night with special guest from Locked On Bills, Joe Marino. Talk to you then.